And as you all are hopping on, we're going to ask you to please rename yourself. You can go to your box. We'll put these instructions in the chat box as well. But please rename yourself to include your name, pronouns, and organization. So again, please rename yourself to include your name, pronouns, and organization. And as you're doing that, also feel free to share in the chat where you are calling in from, where you're joining us from. My name is Marla Karina Larave. I'm a team member on over here at Heal Food Alliance, and I'm based in Piscataway Land, also known as the DC region. And please note that we are streaming this webinar on Facebook Live. So hi to all the folks joining us via Facebook. Thank you for being on. And also please note that we are going to be recording this session. We will share it with all the registrants afterwards, along with ways to stay involved and support today's speakers. All right. Ooh, I see some people joining in from Hawaii. That's great. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, let's go ahead and do a little bit of an agenda review and share with you a little bit about who HEAL is. So just a note that what we're focusing in on today is all about resilient regional economies. We have some wonderful speakers and a wonderful moderator that is going to take us through this content today. We'll get into a little bit about who Heal Food Alliance is and our platform for real food, along with then turning it over to just hear from our speakers about the great work that they're doing in their different locations. We'll have some time for questions and answers, and then we'll close with sharing a little bit with you about our toolkit on this particular piece of our platform. And just a couple of housekeeping notes. You know, we have a commitment to maintaining a safe and engaged environment for our speakers today. So we ask you all to join us in on that commitment. One thing that we're going to be doing is that HEAL staff will be moderating both the Zoom chat as well as comments on the Facebook Live. Our goal at HEAL is always to center and uplift Black, Indigenous, and people of color working across our food systems in all that we do. And so as part of that, we have some moderators that are going to be responding to questions that might come up. We know that sometimes white folks also have some questions around what role they can play in supporting communities of color working across the food system. So feel free to put those in the chat box, and you can direct those to Kristen, who will be moderating those comments on our Zoom, and Anna, who will be moderating those comments on Facebook Live. So yeah, just a little bit of info there for you. Yeah, and we can switch to who HEAL is. So for those of you that are not familiar, Heal Food Alliance is a coalition of different member organizations working across the food and farm system. We have about 50 members across North America that work across health, environment, agriculture, and labor. And our focus is to center and support the hardworking people that grow our food, that are involved in all the steps of the food system and chain all along the way. And we do this collaboratively through our member organizations that are located in different parts of the region. And these are some of our members, for example, and you can always go on our website to learn more about what our members are doing in particular. And yeah, I'll leave it at that, and let's get into the fun bit of the webinar. So I'm going to introduce Jose Oliva. Jose is, we're very lucky to have Jose with us today. He is one of HEAL's founders and our campaign director, and he's going to be moderating today's conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jose.
Thank you so much, Marla, and thank you to all of our speakers and to all of you for joining us today. I'm really excited actually to host this this webinar. There's so much joy, intelligence, and experience that are going to be shared with all of us today by our 5 amazing speakers. They really are cream of the crop, and I'll introduce them all each at a time in a minute. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about this this plank that we are webinaring about. This is plank 4, resilient regional economies. And when we started HEAL, one of the things that we started to do was really talk to a lot of the folks on the ground who are doing this work. A lot of the people who helped inform this plank are probably on this webinar today, right? And definitely some of the folks that are going to be speaking today are folks who informed this webinar, this plank. There's 10 planks in the Real Food platform, and really it's intended to be a roadmap to the kind of food system that we want and that we need in this country and on this planet. As you all know, the word economy is a derivative of Greek, which means the management of home. And so a resilient regional food economy is really about managing our home that allows us and our neighbors to thrive even in the face of adversity. This is especially relevant as we confront the impacts of climate change, and now with COVID-19, and I'm sure with the variants mutating as quickly as they are, that's also going to be extremely important. But it's not just about local food, right? It includes regenerative collective stewardship of our land, of our water, of our natural resources. And it is an economy where there are vibrant opportunities for producers, for distributors, retailers to grow, catch, process, share, sell local foods. And also, it's an economy where workers are owners, where local healthy food is the easy economic choice. It's not something we have to go searching for. It's also a food economy that is about more than fair market-based relationships. It's also about democratic governance of that food system, where local government and public organizations are accountable to an engaged populace. In this vision, cooperative ownership structures that generate real opportunities and wealth, growth, and for low-income communities and communities of color are encouraged and supported. And it's about meaningful work and relationships where informal economies and traditional foodways can flourish together side by side, where human relationships and a sense of purpose are nurtured, and where there is understanding and reciprocity in our relationships with each other and with the earth. And I want to say that is that's the introduction for the plank 4 regional economies in our platform. You are invited to look at the whole platform, to take from there. It's inspired by you, but it certainly shouldn't end there, right? It should be a living document that informs your work and vice versa. And it's informing our work, right? We have developed 5 core methods to actually move our work forward. One of them is this core method that we're actually experiencing today, which is connecting and uniting groups. But we also have 4 other core methods at HEAL advancing this platform. The second one is through political education and analysis. The third one is advancing a shared narrative. The fourth one is connecting and nurturing existing and emerging campaigns. And the fifth one is organizing resources for a BIPOC-led grassroots movement for change. And that's how we, that's the way that HEAL is organized into those 5 core methods of work. I'm going to stop talking because I think I can go on and on about this. I want to begin by introducing some of the speakers today. The first one is Roberto Lewis. And for those of you who don't know Roberto, Roberto's Diné Navajo from Pinon, from the Navajo Nation. He is of the Todichini, the Bitterwater clan, born for the Totsoni, I hope I'm pronouncing that Bidwater name correctly. Correct me, Roberto, if I'm mispronouncing it. Roberto has been actively involved in the sustainable evolution of Black Mesa and the Navajo Nation at large for several years. His experience and expertise includes work in environmental justice, food security, energy efficiency, housing, and youth leadership development. And Roberto is a 2019 School of Political Leadership alumni and is currently working on a Diné food sovereignty policy along with other School of Political Leadership teammates. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Roberto.
Oh, yate. Can you guys all hear me? All right. Oh, yate. As mentioned, my name is Roberto Lewis. Today, I'm going to be talking about the communal stewardship versus private ownership, and what does that mean to Indigenous communities. Again, our people, I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of how we came to where we're at in terms of our food system and the work we're doing. You know, our people are traditionally pastoralist people and farming. And our understanding, our awareness teaches us that our goddess, changing woman, white shell woman, was the one that created these lifeways for us and introduced us to ways of honoring and developing relationships to the livestock that our people had, to all the elements, plant life out there, and gave us these landscapes, the ecological landscapes to call our homes. So, you know, that's how our system was very communal. She is the one that gave us the kinship system in which we governed ourselves and how we manage our internal affairs. But of course, you know, the government came in, the federal government, US government, and enforced us on reservation and imposed their policies. One of the main ones in terms of ownership or stewardship is what we call the Taylor Grazing Act, which formally introduced permitting systems on all federal lands, including tribal lands. And that's the beginning of how our landscape, the management and the stewardship has changed. From before, it was heavily managed by the clan mothers. We are a matriarchal society. The female play an important role in land stewardship. That leadership was taken away from this act, through this act, and through that, the Bureau of Indian Affairs started issuing grazing permits and farming permits, and much of those permits went to the men, and it really created, even internally, there's a lot of land disputes because of that. And that has created a lot of issues in terms of maintaining and continuing and evolving our food system. It's really regulated by the federal government through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and there's so much inefficiencies in that system. And that's some of the challenges that we have in terms of policy, is how can we change some of these land stewardship policies. So for us, when it comes to private ownership versus communal stewardship, it's really about going back to our own traditional ways of how we manage our homelands and how we had those internal self-governance, the systems that were built into that. And again, is really looking back to our kinship systems. And so that's the work that we've been doing, is really looking at policies. Currently, I'm working with the Diné Food Sovereignty Alliance and others that are part of that movement. Is really, I guess currently we're developing a food policy council that will begin to engage with the larger Navajo public on what the needs are. And at the moment, I know some of the focus is around the marketing side. There's the cultural teaching, make sure that we don't forget these teachings, as I mentioned, that was given to us by our holy people. And also making sure that the community as a whole benefits from the rebuilding our food system, that it's not going to be an individualistic system, and that we have to come back to the kinship and really engage from that perspective. And that's where a lot of our community engagement methodology comes in. And we've worked with other partners in developing a culturally appropriate way of engaging our communities in these conversations, because for a long time, the federal government, tribal governments come in with their, federal regulations, tribal regulations that regurgitate these, policies that were really designed to undermine and to really cripple our food system. And it has been successful, these policies. And so it's a very sensitive issue for our communities when we talk about policies. So for that reason, we've created a methodology that really uses traditional knowledge, traditional wisdom. We call it the natural law. What were these original instructions, and how can we use that as a basis for developing food policies that really give the leadership back to the local communities, back to the clan mothers, and through that, how can we create local economic opportunities? And so those are some of the ongoing work that we're having, and we're planning to do more community engagements, both with our farmers and ranchers, and in general, the public, about what their thoughts are, and simultaneously educate our communities about this. So I think that's my 10 minutes right there. Thank you.
You still have some time, Roberto, if you want to.
Oh, I still have some time. Right on. All right. So I wanted to also mention agroecology. When we're talking about climate change, we are experiencing changes on our landscape because of climate change. And I think it's really important, and this is what I like about the agroecology movement that's happening, is really the wisdom and the knowledge needed to rebuild food systems that are resilient is already in the communities. The farmers and ranchers are already experiencing these changes. They are already making their adjustments. And I think they are often overlooked, especially here in America when it comes to people of color and our experience in interacting with our landscape. Our knowledge is often seen as inferior, primitive, backward. So I think part of our work collectively is to really uplift that local knowledge that our people have, and some of the new awareness that they have come across in their continued interaction with their landscape. So really bringing that knowledge up and really utilizing that as a way to rebuild our food system, I think is really important. In terms of organizing, I think it's really important to cross-pollinate how things work and don't work in our communities, so that we can create a stronger movement, not only for ourselves and our communities, but other communities that we find ourselves in the same struggle. So I think that's really important to cross-pollinate ideas and tactics and strategies, because we are dealing with the same monster in terms of capitalistic markets and agro businesses that dominate a lot of the market change. So we have a lot to learn from folks that are doing this work in terms of interacting with the financial markets. One of the things that we see as a need is creative financing. As we rebuild our food systems, how can we do it in a way that really does give power and profit back to the workers and the communities? So I think we have a lot to learn from you all. Simultaneously, I think we have a lot to share also from our own experience working in our communities, Native and Indigenous communities.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Roberto. That is a perfect entry for the rest of the folks who are on. I just want to remind folks that we will have a Q&A session at the end. And so I know there's a lot of questions already buzzing around in my mind for Roberto, and I'm sure it's the same for all of the rest of the folks. So just hold on to them. We'll definitely get to ask questions at the end. Up next, we're going to hear from Allison, Gail, and Alexander from Buffalo, from Urban Fruits and Veggies in Buffalo, New York. I'll really quickly tell you a little bit about the three of them. Allison DeHoney has 20 years of professional service in key areas of executive leadership, project management, and business development. She has spearheaded 4 business endeavors, the latest of which is Urban Fruits and Veggies LLC and Buffalo Go Green, which is a nonprofit organization. She participated in last year's School of Political Leadership as well. Gail Bonita Wells has 2 degrees from SUNY at Buffalo, an undergraduate degree in Public Policy Administration and a graduate degree in Urban Planning. In 2015, Gail was the grand prize winner of the Design to Live Sustainably competition for innovative sustainability using shipping containers as a catalyst to drive economic development by sharply diminishing the startup costs and the risk assumed by entrepreneurs looking to locate on the east side of Buffalo, New York. Gail currently heads up Freedom Gardeners in her local Buffalo community. And finally, Alexander Wright, African Heritage Food Co-op and Legacy Farm. Alexander Wright is a general manager and founder of the African Heritage Food Co-op. The mission of AHFC is to create a community ownership to combat food deserts and eliminate price gouging in the poorest areas of the city. He oversees the daily operations and is the visionary driving force behind the project. Mr. Wright has a BS in Business Management and a law degree from the University of Buffalo. So with that, I turn it over to Allison.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you. I'm going to just share my screen and get, give me 1 second here, please. Okay. I just have just a few pictures of our urban farm. Let's see if I can. Yeah. So Allison Dehoney, Urban Fruits and Veggies. We have an urban farm in Buffalo, New York. And we have a mobile produce market, and we teach wellness and nutrition education. And this is the land that we purchased in the city. There are 3 prior vacant city lots, and this are just some pictures of us building our farm. But what I really want to talk about is how we participate and affect change in our food system and in agriculture. And some of the ways that we do that are to participate in the federal, state, and local levels. We have found, and when I say we, I mean myself, Gail Wells, Alexander Wright, and others in our local area who are in the food system, that it's necessary to participate on all levels. It's not easy, it's time consuming, but and if you're looking for immediate results, that's also something that's likely not to happen. However, we find that it's necessary to take these steps in order to grow our individual businesses and organizations, and in order to affect change for the people that we hold dear in our communities and know desperately need assistance and sometimes can't always speak for themselves. So how do we do that? One of the ways that we do that is by participating in things like public hearings and keeping abreast of what's happening on a national level, so that we can take that information and see how it relates to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis in our local communities. So that is one of the things that we do collectively, and we share that information with each other. I've found that over the last several years, our networking has grown and our communication has grown, and it's become very strong, so that if you know, we're also busy, and if one of us can't be in a space gathering very valuable information, we share it out with each other. And then how do we do that on our state level? For us in New York State, our Buffalo Food Equity Network has put us in spaces with a lot of folks throughout the state, and we formed Black Farmers United New York State, which has grown to about 30 farmers and food systems workers across the state. And just to put that in context, we have 57,000 farmers in New York State, and 139 are Black, and about 125 are Indigenous and or Latino. So we don't have a lot of folks in this space. So we need like all hands on deck to help us affect policy change. So Black Farmers United is a place where we're doing that. We meet monthly to talk about issues and to support each other across the state. Our state is rather large, so it's difficult for us to, if we don't have tight communication, it's difficult for us to know what's happening across the state. And then, and one example of that is, and I'll try to give this example quickly, there was an opportunity for an indoor grow container to be placed in New York State by our New York State Power Authority. And the result of that shipping container went to a white-led organization. And it went to a white-led organization because the Power Authority felt like there was no place to find, they could not find any Black farmers, any Black food system businesses that were run by Black or people of color. So it went to a white-led organization. So we, and one of the organizations that container was recommended to go to was Urban Fruits and Veggies. So what did we do? We gathered the information, we complained, we took it to the Commissioner of Ag, the Commissioner of Ag took it to the Power Authority, and we're getting that turned around. So those are some of the ways that we all need to be working together in order to affect change. And why is that a big deal? That's a big deal because that project is revenue generating, and it's an education piece, an education piece that would be in a community of color, encouraging young folks to potentially at least take a look at the farming industry, ag industry, and food systems industry to see if that's some place that they would like to land. So I'm also the chair of the Food Policy Council. And the Food Policy Council has 6 priority areas. And one of those is agriculture, and the other 5 are economic development, education, environment and climate change, food access, and health. And so the Food Policy Council has historically was not diverse. So since I've become chair, one of my main goals was to make that council diverse so that we know that we're hearing from all aspects of Buffalo and Erie County. So now that we have a more diverse Food Policy Council, we're starting to see that we have action. And so what does action on the ground look like? And I'd like to turn it over to Gail to talk about Freedom Gardens, because this is an example of what action looks like and how we can help affect change.
Thank you, Allison. It was very uplifting to hear Nina Simone saying how it feels to be free, because what I believe is you feel free when you're able to feed yourself. And so we started a grassroots project of feeding our people that live in areas that don't have nutritious and healthy food by having them grow their own food. Very grassroots, backyard gardening, front yard gardening, and an emphasis on providing all of the necessary ingredients, including education, organic seeds and seedlings, soil that is live, and cedar beds for 50 gardeners. That's how we started out. We started last year with 50 gardeners. We're partnering with my partners. Allison has grown seeds for us. We wanted culturally appropriate items or plants for people to grow. So we had to have lots of collard greens, lots of mustard greens, lots of turnip greens, okra, the traditional foods that we wanted people to be able to grow for themselves that are relatively expensive in the grocery store, but particularly expensive if you want to have it organic. And I partnered with Alex. You're going to hear from him next, but he helped us with food distribution once the growing season was over because he has used his resources to help the community. And I'm thankful to them both. The motto for Freedom Gardens is growing liberation and resilience. We work with many others inside Buffalo and throughout the state of New York. I believe we have 1 minute left, and I'm going to turn it over to Alex.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk briefly when we talk about community stewardship versus private ownership. Our position in the African Heritage Food Co-op and Legacy Farms is that we need a mixture of both. So with our food co-op, people own a share. So that share is theirs and their family. But we as a community own the cooperative, right? And the reason we do that is because for folks who are disenfranchised, folks who were told that they were property, they need, in our experience, we found that people need to have that feeling of ownership and that feeling of this is ours and this is something that we can control. What we've seen sometimes with community stewardship is that, one, the stewards rarely look like the community. The folks that, the money that comes to stewardship goes to folks who know folks who know folks in a lot of ways. Not everyone, but it's been our experience. We've seen that. We've also taken that same idea with Legacy Farms. And at Legacy Farms, people lease to own a plot. And we want folks to come out, own and grow, and we're giving them a guaranteed buyer to take the risk out of farming. And we're also helping them learn how to farm because we want to give back what was stolen from folks. And with the New Deal, what happened is there was money and the states were given the power to decide who gets the money. And of course, in the racist system, the folks who needed it were people of color, received nothing. And what I'm trying to do with Legacy Farms, what we're trying to do with things like that is give this back to folks, give folks back to their land, our culture, African people, we're agricultural people, and we're trying to get back to that as well. I think that's the end of my time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alex. Sorry to cut it short. We just want to make sure that we give everyone a little bit of time to speak. Coming up next, we're going to hear from Asia, who is a community partnerships manager at the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. She's also a mother and a daughter of immigrants and a descendant of farmers and liberation fighters, connector, and a self-taught graphic designer. She's a determined organizer, disrupting injustices, stewarding equitable collaborative outcomes of joy, self-care, pleasure, rest, and systems change. So with no further ado, I turn it over to Asia.
Thank you, Jose, and a big thank you to the Heal Food Alliance for holding the space and inviting such awesome folks to speak. I just want to start out with where we organize, acknowledging where we organize, where I'm a guest living here in so-called Chicago with, a twist of inviting folks, beyond a land acknowledgement, thinking about call to action for folks to do their learning journeys on, where you're organizing and understanding sort of the history of broken treaties in a more profound way. And I'm putting some links in the chat for folks. But yeah, to acknowledge the brilliance and resilience of Native communities. Specifically, I'm referring to the areas of the Great Lakes, which is where Chicago Food Policy Action Council organizes. Understanding that Chicago, since time immemorial, has been a center for trade and conviviality. Want to honor the original caretakers of this land, the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Adawa, Potawatomi, and also the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Anoka, Menominee. Chicago is home to over 65,000 Native Americans, survivors of attempted genocide, forced displacement. Despite it all, they are still here, thriving, protecting water, air, land, seeds, and stories for the next generations to come. This next piece is a little different than most land acknowledgements, where you might have a parent, a grandparent, a great-grandparent that is native to the Americas or elsewhere. This is a call to build a foundation with your ancestral homelands in order to come correct with building with folks in which you're residing in their ancestral homelands, and specifically the Great Lakes region. So the work doesn't end here. Please don't ask Native folks for doing this labor for you. I put a bunch of really cool links in the chat. And if you want to support justice work here in the Chicago Native community, want to amplify the Chi Nations Youth Council and their Venmo. There are many organizations to support, but just wanting to start with that. And with that, I'll start a little bit about Chicago Food Policy Action Council and our crew. CFPAC is what we refer as our acronym. This is our team up here in the top photo. And we've grown since during this time of COVID, we've actually doubled in size. And below here are some of the founding, and also Jose is part of the group of our board of directors. Erica Allen from Urban Growers Collective, Anton Seals from Grow Greater Inglewood, and Kim Wasserman from Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, all organizations here in Chicago South Side. This is CFPAC's mission. I want to, read it out loud for folks that are not looking at screens. Chicago Food Policy Action Council co-develops, facilitates, advocates for, and supports implementation of policies that advance food justice and sovereignty across Chicago. So what I'm talking about, in my work, I co-facilitate something called the Urban Stewards Action Network. Community stewardship is inherent into the work that I do with USAN. And I co-facilitate this work with Grow Greater Inglewood, which is an organization here in the South Side. And I wanted to talk about the step zero in the way that we organize, in the way that we come together, and thinking about the application of emergent strategy principles, particularly small is all, which is derivative of fractals. And if you know the book, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I will definitely, here I have the links ready of like Emergent Strategy, and basically where you can find out more information about that. They also do trainings. Hold on, someone is sending me messages here. But here we go. This is Emergent Strategy and the principles that I guide the work that I do with the Urban Stewards Action Network. And I can talk more about, this is the way in which, I'm not going to get into, this is literally from the book. and I'm not going to get into all the details of what each element means and how to apply it. I want to invite people to check out the book and check out the Ideation Institute, which is where you can get training on how to understand more emergent strategy and how to apply it. I'm going to speak on how I apply it in the way I organize and the way I co-facilitate and co-lead the Urban Stewards Action Network, and more about the network. So USAN is the brainchild of Anton Seals and Erica Allen, and I want to say other leaders from Little Village that came together and saw a need for building Black and Brown solidarity. And something to understand with Chicago, it is designed in a way that has segregated Black and Brown communities. Specifically, this is an outcome of redlining. And so there's just such an urgent need to build intentional spaces where we can come together as Black and Brown folks and come together and hold each other in ways that is so healing. That isn't about productivity. It isn't about transactional relationship. It isn't like, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? And blah, blah, blah. This is like, in a real community building way outside of the nonprofit industrial complex, even though we are nonprofits. Centering food and food justice as both a common ground for our work, but also as how we, convivio is the word in Spanish, when I put it here as conviviality. Little Village and Inglewood are both neighborhoods in Chicago South Side. And here on the right, you see a mural that just it says Grow Greater Inglewood, with a beautiful green background and a vine there. This is a mural that just happened, and it's near this, you see this little elevated, their Grow Greater Inglewood is trying to push for this elevated track. And different positions along this elevated track will be farms, and they have some growers already working there. Little Village is a neighborhood in the Chicago Southwest Side. It's an environmental unjust neighborhood, meaning that it has one of the highest rates of asthma due to poor air quality. It's also the home of the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, and the work that they do there is incredible work with on-the-ground frontline organizing to hold the city accountable for policies and injustices around, certain corporations that come in and do harm to the community. So these two organizations, these two communities came together and formed the Urban Stewards Action Network. And this is like some of the pre-COVID programming and events that took place. USAN is primarily composed of Black and Brown growers, but also homesteaders and healers. And just want to, 2 minutes left. I could go on and on, but Food Funding Fridays is a program that we definitely center and hope that post-COVID we can get to. So yeah, I'm gonna breeze through some of our organizing process, starting with self-preservation, and that in every space that we host, USAN hosts monthly meetings, and then we have also our Leaders Council within USAN that we host as well, monthly meetings, but we wrestle with these things at every single meeting, meaning we hold space for people to talk about. We're not in this war against time, so we often go over time, but we understand that this is what's needed for this work to happen. So I'm gonna quickly go through these because I don't have a lot of time left and I wanna leave time, but I wanna center some of these things, like understanding intergenerational trauma and centering that, like I said, for every single minute that you show up and work with community. Understanding community stewardship on a regional scale doesn't begin with thinking big. It actually begins with thinking small and thinking at the very micro level, how you engage and how you come correct with everybody you encounter, but specifically in a BIPOC space, how you really treat each other and dismantle white supremacy culture traits and internalized oppression that you may carry. We make sure that trust is centered and that we hold safe space for honest conversation, meaning this is going to get uncomfortable and it's okay. That's actually a sign. Like a sign of good relationship isn't how well you vibe. It isn't how well you get along. It's how well you argue. And then we are very transparent with budgets. If CIFPAC, if we receive a grant, we are going to share that budget with the USAN leadership and think about like ways we can adjust it that makes sense for folks. And so this is a shout out to some of our Leaders Council folks. We center love and unconditionally. We center love in the work that we do. We're not shy about that. And yeah, with that, I will wrap up. Thank you all.
Thank you, Asia. Really appreciate that. We up next have one of my personal heroes, Rosalinda Guillen, who is a widely recognized farm worker and rural justice leader. She's the oldest of 8. She was born in Texas and spent her first decade in Coahuila, Mexico. Her family immigrated to La Conner, Washington in 1960, and she began working as a farm worker in the fields of Skagit County at the age of 10. Ms. Guillen has worked within the labor movement with Cesar Chavez, United Farm Workers of America, and has represented farm workers in ongoing dialogues of immigration issues, labor rights, trade agreements, and strengthening the food sovereignty movement. She works to build broader base of support for rural communities and sustainable agriculture policies that ensure equity and health communities for farm workers. I leave you with Rosalinda.
Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to us today. And I'd like to thank the HEAL Alliance for this great invitation. And hopefully, I don't have any slides or anything to present, but I do want to speak about food sovereignty. And I love the title of your presentation, Resilient Regional Economies. I think as a farm worker, still living in the farm worker community and organizing farm workers, it's become really clear to us, even clearer than it was before, even though it was pretty clear, that we have no resilient regional economies. That almost everywhere, especially in rural communities, we as farm workers are really left to fend for ourselves. And we are the ones that, especially right now during the COVID pandemic, we are paying by having disproportionate infections and disproportionate deaths in the farm worker community from COVID-19 virus. During our work here at Community to Community in Washington State with our partners, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, and now Trabajadores Unidos por la Justicia in the Yakima Valley, the 2 local independent farm worker unions, our fight to just save lives during this pandemic has become the primary focus. So when you talk about resilient regional economies, you cannot have, I don't see how you can have any kind of an economic dynamic or an economic, shall we say, discussion or a framework for a resilient economy if you're not going to talk about how workers are going to be part of that economic equation. You cannot have a viable economic equation without taking care of working people. And I think that as a country and as a capitalist society, the workers that hold up some of the most essential duties in this nation are consistently being overlooked. So our organization, Community to Community Development, exists as a support network to support, first of all, farm workers, and to address the inequities in the quasi-slave labor system that really still exists in corporate agriculture in the United States. So I want to say that as a farm worker, I am sitting in La Conner, Washington. I've come full circle from all of my organizing work and returned home and to my family home and sit across the channel here on the water back in relation with my brothers and sisters of the Swinomish people. and have recognized from the very beginning that this land was not ours, that it did belong to the Swinomish people here locally, and that there had been a lot of damage done because my friends as a child explained to me all of the needs that the creatures here on the channel had. The protection of the seaweed and the sea gardens, how they used to live, and the salmon, the crabs and the oysters, and all of the food that they needed to live with. They're food gatherers, not farmers. And it was an interesting relationship as a farm worker, working for corporate agriculture, being in equitable relationships with food gatherers that were very close to my heart. I say it over and over again that if it was not for the Swinomish people, this person that you see in front of me would not be the person that I am today. They have sustained me both spiritually and culturally, in understanding that as a brown person, what my role has traditionally been in the United States. And that is not, it's not an equitable role. So in our organization, we look at resilient and sustainable economies through the lens of building what we call a solidarity economy. And that solidarity economy is about eventually having local economies be at least 35 to 40% from worker-owned cooperatives. That if you can build an infrastructure, an economic infrastructure on a regional level where all of the resilience is coming from worker-owned cooperatives, then you're looking at true resiliency and true survival for our people. We know, and we are building a culture within our organization and with our partners in trying to understand and educate our Latino immigrant community that we work with every day about our traditions from Mexico that come out of the ejido lifestyle, the ejido landowning, communal landowning that existed for many, since time immemorial almost in Mexico, and what the Mexican Revolution was about and what Emiliano Zapata fought for, which was the ability for farm worker, peasant communities in Mexico to have communal ownership of their land and to keep the American imperialists, the US-based American imperialists out of the corporate production that they wanted access to in Mexico, which was the sugarcane and oil and many other, access to many other resources in Mexico. So we are building a cooperative development center. That is our ultimate goal in community to community development, in our partnerships and our organizers, is to have a solidarity economy development center where we are educating and building worker-owned co-ops from the farm worker community, being led by the farm worker community, including building a land trust that is owned by us. We are a landless workforce. And I think that there are many workers in the United States that are landless. And without land and access to land, especially as farm workers, we really have we have a very little chance of true self-determination. We believe in collective bargaining. We believe in negotiating our worker protections, our worker rights, and our wages with the employer. But as the farm workers have told me over and over again, even with a union contract, Rosalinda, we still have a boss. And we still have to watch our backs with that boss all the time. Come renegotiation time, we have to deal with it. Our workers and the members of Familias Unidas por la Justicia are indigenous people from Guerrero and Oaxaca. And they still hold their traditions of participatory democracy and their own decision-making models. And they have today the largest collective bargaining agreement with one of the largest berry growers in the state of Washington. And what they lead us in our mission that we must own our own land. And they are working hard to reestablish their traditions in the United States. And they have told us over and over again, as a lot of indigenous people from Mexico have said, without land, we will never have true self-determination. And we will fight for our union. We will fight for the right to collectively bargain. We will fight for benefits and decent wages, but we want land to farm ourselves. So we continue to look at ways that we can establish processes with participatory democratic models that includes indigenous people and farm workers on how we're going to transform and recreate the governance structures at the local level so that we can have access to resources, including land, but that includes funding. Our ultimate goal as an organization and as farm workers is to restructure a corporate industry in the United States into a true food system. I think that this has become evident in listening to the previous speakers. I want to thank you for all of the hard work that you're doing and looking at food sovereignty. And I think that food sovereignty is about being sovereign. Being sovereign as human beings and not being an arrogant species that is looking to produce food to put into our mouths that is destroying other species in the process. And that is what corporate agriculture is doing today. And they are making us, the farm worker labor force, complicit in their destruction of native land, in the poisoning of the air and the water that benefits not just other humans, but other innocent creatures, right down to the smallest microbe in the soil that we need to keep resiliency and sustainability for all peoples. So we, as an organization, with our partners, because we are a movement and we are but one component of a farm worker movement in the state of Washington that has worked for 17 years to create alliances and to work together with others in defending, first of all, the right of farm workers to exist, and defending the right of farm workers to have a voice. And now we're actually trying to save the lives of farm workers so that we can continue our work. So we work at the ground level with farm workers, as farm workers, to organize and create democratic structures within our own communities using dignity vigils, dignity alliance, tribunals, and people's movement assemblies to bring our base together to make this collected decisions that then move up the structure into the policy arena and into direct action arena. So we're very involved in trying to undo capitalism, and we're believers in the just transition format of how we're going to create a better world with others. We do center everything that we do on self-respect and dignity, and respect all of the folks that work with us. We are an ecofeminist organization, first of all. We are led by women. The women in our organizations make the decisions and work with men to move liberation forward. Right now, we are in some very crucial political moments in our nation and in the food system. And before I stop speaking, I want to make sure that I put out some of the critical policies that we're working on right now. At the Washington state level, we have been through a coalition that we helped to create called Front and Centered. We have been working hard with many organizations in Washington state to oppose cap and trade and to create climate justice policies at the state level that will bring reparations to the damage that's already been created, been brought on native lands, to protect the communities in rural areas from toxic poisoning from corporations, but to build a resilient future and protect us from climate change and actually create new ways of being in the changing climate of this world, especially in the area of food production. The corporate agricultural industry in Washington state is politically dominant and very powerful, and has been for a long time. Brothers and sisters, the apples of Washington state and the cherries of Washington state do not make a food system. And we keep hearing from our government that we must protect the food system, and therefore farm workers have to cave in to not being fully protected against COVID. And we continue to speak strongly that a Washington state apple does not a food system make, and therefore farm workers need to be protected for the future. So we are opposing cap and trade in Washington state. Right now, there is a bill in the state of Washington to basically create a cap and trade system that is not being called cap and trade. So they've gotten smart enough to not call it that. And we're trying to protect our rural communities from toxic devastation, from polluting corporations in Washington state. We're also fighting, Familias Unidas is fighting right now in the Washington state legislature to implement legally mandated overtime, full overtime for farm workers over 40 hours a week. And so we are very hopeful that this is actually going to happen in the Washington State Legislature this year. Familias Unidas is fighting really hard to ensure that farm workers in Washington State do reach that goal of being paid overtime. We're also at the local level, at the Washington State level, the federal level, strongly and firmly opposing the Farm Workforce Modernization Act that is being called a Farm Worker Legalization Act on a national level. We have opposed this bill because it links legalization for immigrants with the H-2A program, which is a guest worker program, a federally mandated guest worker program on a national level. And in Washington State today, some of the highest deaths and infection rates in farm workers have been from imported farm workers from Mexico that are not being protected from COVID-19. And we have right now, by the end of May, we will have close to 25,000 guest workers being brought into Washington State with no protections. We have had deaths, both from COVID, but in past years from dehydration and exhaustion of guest workers that are being brought in to help with these corporate this harvest of corporate apples, cherries, blackberries, raspberries, and blueberries. And we strongly oppose the use of the guest worker program. So we ask our legislators and our representatives to really look at immigration from a different perspective and oppose the Farm Labor Modernization Act. As farm workers, we believe we don't need modernization. We know exactly what we need. We need the same rights as other workers have, and we need the agricultural industry to become a food system. So when you talk about, liberation and farm workers, community to community, Familias Unidas por la Justicia really see our future in land trusts, in owning the means of production from the food system, and eventually in really having some very strong food policy councils and food departments, and really look at food from a whole perspective of the wellness of the community, the wellness of the earth, and the respect that Indigenous peoples deserve. And we honor them for having protected our environment as much as they have, or we'd be in, let me tell you, much worse shape. But I think when you're talking about farm workers and you're talking about the food system, you have to listen to what the farm workers are living, what direction that they're setting, and then move forward from that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. I could go on for hours too.
No, we love what you're saying. Thank you so much, Rosalinda. I wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of time
Absolutely.
for questions. If there are questions for Rosalinda, Roberto, Asia, Gail, any of the other presenters today, please drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure to read them out. I do want to start with one question that we've gotten, I think repeatedly, and it's probably not a new question for any of you, but and this is really for any of you. Have you seen examples of community stewardship replacing private ownership to benefit communities, workers, or the environment? This is for any of the speakers. And while you're thinking about it, I want to invite everyone to stick around after the Q&A. Zina, one of the HEAL members, is going to walk us through a PowerPoint that we are using. So any questions? Any answers from folks?
Jose, I suppose I could speak to our attempt at something like that.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that we have actually managed to buy 65 acres of land, and we're actively looking for additional land to create the land trust that we want to create. And on the 65 acres, we have a farm worker-owned cooperative that's actually growing blueberries, raspberries and strawberries today. And we just managed to finish the solar project on that land so that eventually what we want that to be is a wholly self-sustaining farming community, not a farm. And I think that is an attempt that we're doing in trying to have communally owned land by farm workers. It's been a long road. It's difficult to have a mind switch to community owned land from private ownership, but it's happening right now. We're working very hard at it. It's been difficult, but it's the co-op, it's called Tierra y Libertad, and the farm workers are very proud of that. It's an ongoing process on the communally owned land. We hope that within 3 years we will have housing built on the land for the 4 farm worker owners that will be running the community. As a community owned land, it is quickly becoming a resource for many community of where to gather without being hassled. So we're building structures for community gatherings there. That's really the only thing I can offer. We've been looking for those types of models. Unless you want to go to Brazil and look at the landless peoples movement, that's where it really exists.
Right. Anyone else have any reactions to that?
In Buffalo, we have a fruit belt land trust, fruit belt of the community in Buffalo, New York. And it's something that's just started. Land has been acquired. There's supposed to be some affordable housing being built on that. I think it's a good attempt. I'm just leery about the folks who own it and control it. But you know, we're definitely making a move toward doing that. But I have yet to see it benefit the community. But I'm hoping some good things will happen.
That's great. Thank you, Alex.
Rosalina, I think what you've drawn my attention to, and I so appreciate it, because I just had a workshop, attended a workshop on the good mind, which was presented by a faith keeper from the Onondaga people in Western New York. And this is this concept of consciousness, of coming to something with the not just the idea. A lot of what you said touched me because you were talking about the right thinking of the people and where they were coming from and the ideals and the principles that they were trying to lift up. And when you said, I believe you said, a farming community, not a farm. I think Alex hit on it when he said, well, we do have a land trust, but I don't know if the land trust has the trust of the people. I don't know if what we're striving to do is really dismantling the system and reimagining something new, or is it's just shuffling the cards and giving the power to oppress to another group that has learned how to oppress from the original oppressor. So I really love what you said. And I'm going to take everything that everyone has said here, and we're going to get back in Buffalo and get to some serious work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I don't want to put you on the spot, Roberto, but I'm wondering if you can touch on this. Just from what I know of your work, it sounds like there's a lot of that element is embedded in there.
Yeah, our land status is a little bit different. Currently, I guess, in legal framework, the tribal reservations are federal trust land, so we don't have individual ownership out here. And in that land steward, or in that land tenure, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is the main one that kind of issues permits of what you can and cannot do on our own landscapes. But then the basis of these permits also more towards individualism type of land management and interaction with landscapes. So when it comes to the larger stewardship of our landscape, in which we've been involved with around watershed, it's been very difficult because the current land tenure on tribal lands, you have to go through each individual permittee holder and initiate that process, which is very technical and very ineffective. So one of our collective work has been trying to bring together communities. We call them chapters. They're kind of like townships, bringing them together under the watershed that they live within, and begin to plan how are we going to manage our landscape, our watersheds, and all the infrastructures, the food systems, the transportation, the utilities. How are we going to manage this in the face of climate change and the changing landscape? So that's an effort that we've been doing from the grassroots, trying to organize local government. It's very challenging. And one of the strategy also in this work is trying to raise more of the civil society within our tribal government system. With that, we know we've looked at community land trusts, looking at different association models of associations that communities could do to organize themselves a little bit more formally. So those are still some research that we're doing, and really engaging with the tribe, what they will allow us to organize as and to be seen as legitimate. But I think overall, what we're calling for is a recognition of at least within our communities, Navajo communities, that the civil society has solutions and has creative strategy to address this, the issue of land stewardship from a more community grassroots based level rather than government top-down approach. So it's an ongoing work and it's a little bit more complex. But again, what we're trying to do is trying to give the decision-making processes back to the local communities from a cultural perspective, really engaging the clan mothers in these conversations and really uplifting those goals and visions that they see, and really try to push that into some of the legal frameworks and some of the bureaucracies that we have to engage with in terms of different federal agencies that we have to work with in this restoration work that we're trying to do.
Yeah, such a rich topic of of conversation. I encourage everyone who's on this chat to share this recording with other folks that they work with, and try to add our wisdom together to this. This is a question for you, Rosalinda, although I think anyone really can answer it, but it's a question that can you share more on how working conditions for workers fit into resilient regional economies? Just because you're local doesn't mean that you're not exploiting workers.
I think that is absolutely true. I think we've seen even the organic farmers. I mean, we get complaints of exploitation from almost every type of farmer. It's the system, right? It's a capitalist farming system. It is not a food system. It is a system that's been created for profit. And so anybody that moves into the system as it exists needs to make a profit. And that profit has to come from somewhere. And I think that that's part of the problem when you look at, restructuring your own mind to try to understand how to create a food system, which is coming from a very different perspective. I think that we have seen, exploitation from Latino farmers just as much as white farmers. We have seen exploitation from organic farmers as just as much as regular farming. So I think that when you look at solutions for climate change or what is happening in our community, both from an economic level to an environmental justice level, if you listen to workers, every worker that is skilled at whatever task they're doing has a solution to the problem that the communities are seeing, whether that be economically or whether that's operationally, protecting the environment, restructuring another system. The workers know, because they're living that thing every single day. We spend more time at a workplace than we do with our own families. So I think that when you're talking about restructuring an economy, it really needs to, I mean, when you think, common sense would say, you sit down with the workers doing all of these tasks that the community as a whole needs, and you ask them what's going well, what needs to be improved, and how do we do that together? I mean, we need to like totally flip the whole dynamic around in a community. And I'm talking a larger scale, right? Of what are the things that need to be improved? And right now with climate change, needs to be restructured for survival and reparation to people and Mother Earth, right? So I seriously think that workers have to be at the center of every single discussion when we're talking about resilient economies.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rosalinda. Another question for all the speakers. How can differing levels of government play a role in nurturing resilient regional economies, from the local, I'm assuming, to the federal? This is for anyone, any of the speakers.
Well, if nobody's going to jump in, I just think if we don't address structural racism in government policy structures and representation, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. I just really, truly believe that at every single level, we have to speak up about the racial barriers that exist in government at every single level for everything. And I'm really happy that that's beginning to happen, but it's not happening strong enough or it's not well coordinated yet, in my opinion, to accelerate the change and the removal of race, white patriarchy and racial barriers in government.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to this?
I just think that these governmental agencies and municipalities and entities, they have to want this. Like, if they don't want it, we're going nowhere. And I think we're wasting our time. So we just, as folks doing this work on the ground, we just have to keep searching for those who have some type of understanding and are willing to, put things in motion to start to affect change and understand that people of color are behind the 8 ball. We are not starting at a level playing field. And once we get those folks on board, I think we're going to start to affect change. But if there's no interest and there's no understanding, it's just not going to happen.
I agree, Allison. We have to find ways to create relationships with everyone. It seems that what this time is all about.
Yeah.
I think what partnerships is really important. And I think when you do find, the people, the alder person or a state representative or legislator that you can really develop a relationship with and have trust, that you can't get too comfortable with that relationship. Meaning, like, if they do something that's not aligned, or we have to compromise here because that's just how you play the game, you have to, accountability has to be part of the relationship with every single government organization, department, representative that you have. You can't be afraid of, like, oh, well, we'll ruin the relationship, and because then you begin to delineate your work and you lose sight of what you're trying to do. I think that's really important to maintain the integrity and to not be afraid of, if you're gonna lose the relationship, you have to stand ground.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and a perfect place for us to pivot. I want to briefly introduce Zina Abaniz, who is a member of the HEAL team and who's done an amazing job of putting together a set of toolkits that we can all use in our work on this topic and on the other 9 planks of our platform as well. And so she's just gonna take a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit more about that. Zina?
Thank you, Jose, and thanks to the incredible speakers for taking us through all of that, and also to Jose for introducing the platform in the beginning. So I want to take a moment to tell you all about the Platform Toolkit, which is a resource, like Jose said, for all of us to keep learning about some of the things that came up in today's webinar and about how HEAL members are going about building resilient regional economies in their communities. So if you head to our website, you'll see, right now I've got screenshots, so you don't need to. You'll see that we have member dispatches, which really include stories from our membership. So for this particular toolkit, we've spoken to someone from COFED, which is an organization that helps students and young people create cooperatives across the country. And we've also spoken with Hope Collaborative, which is an Oakland-based organization that does local policy work, but also just like does a lot of work building community and providing food access to people in Oakland. We also have a list of resources, and this includes reports, articles, guides and toolkits that other members and other allies and partners have created that should help you all kind of dig into what it means to create and what tools are needed to create resilient regional economies. And we also have, we're releasing a series of posts about different aspects of regional economies, breaking down some stuff and also digging into some history. We invite you to come back to this toolkit and share it with your communities and your organizations who want to learn more about what HEAL's vision for a resilient regional economy is, what HEAL members are doing, and what folks across the country are moving forward in order to make this happen. And Nishani just dropped the link to the toolkit in the chat, so feel free to check it out. We'll also be sending across this and a bunch of other resources that came up in the chat in an email to everyone that's here today. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jose.
Thank you so much, Zina, for breaking that down for us. It really is a great tool. I want to take a couple of minutes just to thank the speakers, Roberto and Allison and Gail and Alex and Asia and Rosalinda for all of the work that they do and for being with us today. We've gotten so much appreciation from everyone on the webinar. I think we've all learned so much from you all today and really appreciate you taking time. I know it's a busy time for all of us. So appreciate much of your time. And I do want to say, just to wrap everything up, that we will be sending a follow-up email linking all the resources that the speakers shared, resources that we shared, including the toolkit that Zina just spoke on. And we'll definitely commit to making sure that we are all in community together and that we continue to fight for a better food system together. So thank you all very much for taking the time, and we will see you next time.